Welcome. Today we're undertaking a really thorough exploration of a figure whose name is just synonymous with competitive genius and, ultimately, a tragic destiny. Ayrton Senna da Silva. His career, it really did transcend sport, turning him into a global cultural phenomenon.
It truly did. I mean, Senna wasn't just a Formula One driver. He was this uncompromising force of nature who just captured the imagination of millions.
Absolutely.
Our sources confirm he secured 3 Formula One world championships in 88, 90, and 91. And this is critical. He held the record for the most pole positions ever recorded at the time of his death. A staggering 65.
And that stat is just a pure measure of raw single-lap speed.
Exactly.
So our objective here is pretty clear. We want to synthesize the key moments of his fiercely competitive journey, to really dissect the defining rivalries that fueled him, and to trace the immense world-changing safety legacy that emerged from that tragic final weekend of his career. It's a story defined by this intense duality,
Right. The ruthless precision needed to win contrasted with this profound spirituality and humanity that guided him off the track.
So let's begin with the foundations. Senna was born in Sao Paulo in 1960. He was the middle child, and his background was, well, it was rooted in significant wealth.
It was. His father, Milton da Silva, was very successful as both a landowner and a factory owner. And this context meant that Senna had opportunities, he had resources available to him that, frankly, many aspiring racers just did not.
That wealth certainly provided the infrastructure, but you get the sense the drive was completely intrinsic.
Oh, absolutely. The origin story of his racing obsession is wonderfully simple. His very first go-kart was actually assembled by his father, and it used a 1-horsepower engine from a lawnmower.
Oh, lawnmower engine.
Yeah, it just illustrates this early, almost grassroots connection to mechanical motion, despite the family's means.
We should also touch on the shift in his name.
Yeah.
We know he was born Ayrton Senna da Silva, but professionally he adopted his mother's surname, Senna. And this was more than just a preference, wasn't it?
It was a very strategic, practical decision. He was aiming for international recognition. For anyone familiar with Brazil, they'll know that da Silva is the most common surname in the country.
Right, it would be like Smith or Jones in the English-speaking world.
Precisely. So to truly stand out on a European grid, especially in the junior formulas where names are quickly learned, Senna offered instant, unique branding. It speaks volumes that even that early on, he was thinking globally about his professional identity.
Physically, our sources note a really interesting contradiction. He was highly athletic, excelling in things like gymnastics, yet he reportedly had poor motor coordination very early in life.
Yeah, even struggling to climb stairs at age 3. If that's true, overcoming that slight physical deficit must have required just immense focus.
That's a fascinating psychological point.
It really is. It suggests that the legendary precision he developed later, that almost inhuman ability to place a car within millimeters of a wall, wasn't just innate talent. It was a deliberately engineered skill, built through obsessive effort and control.
His parents called him Bako, affectionately.
They did. And his mechanical affinity showed early. He was driving a Jeep around the family farm by age 7, already mastering clutchless gear changes.
And that focus on control led him naturally into competitive karting, which spanned from 1973 to 1980. This is where that core competitive fire was really forged.
It was. He started racing competitively at 13 at the Interlagos circuit, and he immediately set the standard.
His debut race.
He qualified on pole position in his debut. Against drivers who were older, more experienced. The talent was just explosive.
So he quickly moved up.
Very quickly. He won the South American Kart Championship in 1977 and then finished runner-up twice at the Karting World Championship in 79 and 80. But, the crucial relationship from this period was his rivalry with his DAP teammate, Terry Fullerton.
And why do our sources highlight Fullerton specifically? I mean, this is years before he's battling F1 legends.
Because Senna himself consistently cited Fullerton as the rival he respected and enjoyed competing against the most. He called it pure racing.
Pure racing.
In karting, the machinery is relatively standardized. The commercial pressures, the political maneuvering, they're minimal compared to the F1 circus. It was a true, unfiltered battle of talent and instinct, and Senna felt that competitive purity was often lost later in his career.
So that early experience really shaped his belief that success should be defined by talent alone.
And that's exactly what made him clash with the political structures of Formula One later on.
So after his karting success, he makes the mandatory move to Europe for open-wheel racing between 1981 and 83, settling in England.
Yes, near Norwich. and he achieved immediate, just total domination. In 1981, his debut season, he swept both the British and the Townsend Thorson Formula Ford 1,600 championships.
And he just kept winning.
Almost unbeatable. By 1982, in British F2000, he won 15 out of 17 races. That kind of conversion rate, translating that raw talent into overwhelming result on foreign soil, made him impossible for the F1 teams to ignore.
The definitive test, though, had to be the British Formula 3 Championship in 1983. This was his final proving ground, and it was a truly contentious battle.
It was fierce, dramatic, and very public. He was fighting against Martin Brundle, who was driving for Eddie Jordan Racing in a very similar car. Senna dominated the first half of the season, built up this seemingly insurmountable lead.
But Brundle fought back.
He mounted a huge comeback in the second half, which led to intense, close-quarters racing and frequent accusations of blocking of aggressive driving from both sides.
So it wasn't just a friendly title fight. This was psychological warfare, even at the F3 level.
Absolutely. It was vital. Senna won the championship at the final round, but the pressure, the contention, it mirrored exactly what he would face at the pinnacle of the sport. And to cap off that year, he also won the inaugural Macau Grand Prix,
which has always been seen as that high-pressure gateway race before securing an F1 seat.
Exactly. He proved he could handle technical cars, intense rivalry, and those winner-take-all scenarios. He was ready.
Now we move to 1984, the year he made the leap into Formula One. Despite his sparkling junior record, securing the right seat was, well, surprisingly fraught with politics and missed opportunities.
It really highlights how F1 has always operated. Pure talent is only ever part of the equation. Senna initially declined an early, long-term offer from McLaren, a team he clearly respected.
Why turn them down?
He feared being locked into a potentially restrictive contract so early in his career, which, in hindsight, proved ill-timed when McLaren subsequently signed Alain Prost, closing that door for a while.
And he faced vetoes from established stars, too.
Yes. His fellow Brazilian champion Nelson Piquet, who was at Brabham, actively vetoed Senna from joining his team. He preferred his friend Roberto Moreno to take the test driver slot instead.
So these political roadblocks really forced his hand.
They did. He ended up taking a less-than-ideal debut seat with Toleman, which was a relatively small new team running on the less competitive Pirelli tires.
But before signing with Toleman, he tested for McLaren, Brabham, and Williams. And these tests gave the F1 bosses a glimpse of his intense, meticulous nature.
The Williams test anecdote is often repeated because it just showcases his preparation. Frank Williams observed that Senna insisted on running the car only after all the regular drivers had finished.
Why?
To ensure he received a completely fresh, optimized car. He didn't want any excuses related to mechanical compromise, and it paid off. At Donington, he clocked times faster than Keke Rosberg, who was the reigning world champion at the time.
An immediate signal of his pace.
A huge signal. But the public really took notice during his debut highlight, the 1984 Monaco Grand Prix. This became the definitive demonstration of his wet weather mastery.
It was an incredible drive. He qualified 13th, which is a decent position for a Toleman, but then the rain started falling.
And he was just unstoppable. He carved through the field, passing greats like Niki Lauda on lap 19 for second place. The sources say he was catching Prost, who was leading in a much superior McLaren, by about 4 seconds per lap.
4 seconds a lap.
Before the race was controversially stopped on lap 31, officially due to safety concerns.
If the race had continued for just a few more laps, he would have won. That single performance earned him the title Rainmaster instantly.
It did, and he'd done it in a less powerful, under-tired car. But maybe the most illustrative story about his hyper-precision came later that year at the Dallas Grand Prix.
The story about the moving wall. Let's unpack that, because it tells us so much about his unique feedback system.
So his race engineer at the time, Pat Simons, recalls Senna retiring after hitting a wall. Most drivers would just blame poor grip or bad luck, but Senna came back to the pits absolutely convinced that the concrete wall had moved.
And Simons was skeptical.
Very skeptical. He thought it was just a driver's excuse, but Senna insisted he go check after the race.
And what did he find?
He found that the wall, which was a temporary concrete block on the street circuit, had been shifted slightly, just a few millimeters from an earlier impact. The leading edge was sticking out right into Senna's racing line.
So Senna, driving with such immense precision, had calibrated his line to the millimeter based on his feel of the track.
Exactly. And those few millimeters were enough to snag his wheel and end his race.
That degree of calibration is almost unbelievable, especially in the pre-telemetry era. So why does that matter in the long run?
It matters fundamentally because it explains his reliance on tactile feedback. Senna drove by feel. He used the subtle movements and resistance of the car as his primary input. He was a human sensor, not just a driver.
And that ties into 1994.
Directly, when he joined Williams in '94, the ban on electronic aids stripped the car of all stability, no traction control, no active suspension, and it destroyed that feedback loop. The unstable car destroyed the very foundation of his driving method. His struggles in 1994 started right there, the loss of precision control.
That makes the transition to his time at Lotus from 1985 to 87 even more crucial as he honed that precision with much more powerful machinery.
In '85, he joined Lotus and immediately translated potential into victory. He took his first pole and his first win at the Portuguese Grand Prix, which was another rain-affected race,
He won by over a minute.
lapping everyone up to third place. He later said that it was the best drive of his entire career.
And this is where he also started to establish himself as the quickest qualifier in the field.
Absolutely. He secured 7 poles that season, primarily thanks to the era of the qualifying engine. Lotus was using the Renault V6 turbo, which in qualifying trim could push out up to 1,000 horsepower.
Incredible power.
And Senna mastered exploiting this raw, explosive power over a single lap. This ability to extract the absolute maximum speed on a Saturday became his trademark.
But success brought conflict. His relationship with his Lotus teammate, Elio De Angelis, quickly deteriorated, and he was involved in some contentious team politics.
The competitive intensity was just overriding the team dynamic. Senna's demands for top driver status essentially pushed De Angelis out. More controversially, he actively blocked the signing of Derek Warwick for the 1986 seat.
What was his justification for that?
He publicly argued that Lotus lacked the resources and infrastructure to adequately support 2 top drivers at the same time, and that having 2 equally competitive drivers would detract from his own title challenge.
Which is brutally honest,
Right.
perhaps to a fault.
It is. It's a ruthless display of prioritizing personal competitive advantage over any kind of team harmony. And although he later admitted that decision was bad, it shows the depth of his commitment to eliminating variables that could jeopardize a victory. He was completely focused on maximizing his chances.
Despite the friction, 1986 and 87 were marked by incredible speed, especially the 1986 Spanish Grand Prix.
Oh, that finish was electric. It's one of the closest in F1 history. Senna edged out Nigel Mansell by a margin of just .014 seconds.
And the cars themselves were just monsters.
Unbelievable. The Lotus 98T he drove in '86 could produce over 1,300 horsepower in qualifying. These were some of the most powerful and demanding cars ever seen in Formula One.
And this is when he started his signature victory ritual.
Yes. After winning the Detroit Grand Prix, he began waving the Brazilian flag on his victory lap. This wasn't just a simple celebration. It rapidly became this powerful symbol of national pride and turned him into a national hero back in Brazil.
For 1987, Lotus secured a vital engine contract that really set up his future move to McLaren.
They switched to the Honda V6 turbo engines, the same units that had just powered Williams to the Constructors' Championship. And Senna, well, he secured a contract guaranteeing him preferential treatment over his new teammate, Satoru Nakajima.
Which again just underscores his focus on being the undisputed #1.
Always. But that leverage didn't stop the drama. That year also featured a pretty intense physical confrontation with Mansell at Spa.
What happened there?
After a collision, Mansell, who is notoriously hot-tempered, was just enraged. He physically grabbed Senna by the throat in the pits. Mechanics had to intervene to separate them.
And amidst all this high drama, he secured his first win at Monaco.
The first of his eventual record, 6 victories there. A record that just speaks to his precision and focus in that high-stakes, tight street circuit environment.
The 1988 season changed everything. Senna moved to McLaren to partner Alain Prost, launching what is arguably the most significant and dramatic rivalry in the history of the sport. They were driving the Honda-powered MP44, a car that quickly became legendary.
That car was pure perfection. The MP44 is still one of the most statistically dominant F1 cars ever produced. Senna and Prost combined to win 15 of the 16 Grand Prix that year.
So the World Championship became a fierce internal battle.
Exactly. And Senna ultimately won his first title, but it was incredibly close.
And the scoring rules played a key role in that '88 title fight.
They did, yes. Prost technically scored more total points over the whole season, but the rules at the time said only the best 11 results counted toward the final standings. This rule just narrowly favored Senna, allowing him to take the championship.
But the on-track dominance quickly broke down any professionalism within the team.
It did. And the moment the rivalry became outright hostile was at the Portuguese Grand Prix.
What happened?
This was psychological warfare taking physical form. On the main straight, Prost attempted to pass Senna at nearly 290 kilometers per hour. Senna swerved to block him, forcing Prost dangerously close to the pit wall.
And Prost was enraged.
Utterly. Prost was a measured, strategic racer, and he deemed the move excessively dangerous and unprofessional. And although Senna did apologize in the team debrief, the relationship was irrevocably damaged. It set the stage for 2 years of championship-deciding collisions.
So let's focus on the first of those. At Suzuka in 1989. This was the penultimate race, and Senna had to win to stay in the title fight.
The stakes were astronomical. Prost was meticulous in his preparation. He had strategically removed the gurney flap from his car to maximize straight-line speed, which made him difficult to pass, though it compromised his cornering a bit.
And Senna had to make a move.
He tried a high-risk dive on the inside of the final chicane. Prost turned in, they collided, locked their wheels, and just slid into the escape road.
Senna then controversially rejoined the race after a push start from the marshals, cut the chicane, pitted for repairs, and went on to win.
Only to be disqualified hours later. He was disqualified for 2 primary reasons. First, for rejoining the track outside the legal limits by cutting the chicane, and second, for receiving outside assistance with the push start.
And Senna was furious.
Livid. He received a massive fine and a temporary suspension of his racing license. He publicly accused the FIA and its French president, Jean-Marie Balestri, of rigging the decision to favor his compatriot Prost. This established a deep-seated belief in Senna that the political system was actively working against him.
And that paranoia, that rage carried directly into the 1990 Suzuka decider, where Prost had now moved to Ferrari.
Senna started on pole. He'd been lobbying officials to have the pole position moved to the clean side of the track, and he believed he had an agreement. When the decision went against him, which he blamed on Balestri's interference, he went into the race with his singular goal.
Prost got a better start.
He did. Starting second, he pulled ahead into the first corner. Senna did not lift his foot from the accelerator. He kept it planted and intentionally drove into Prost, taking both cars out instantly and winning the championship on the spot.
It was an act of deliberate competitive sabotage. How did Senna reconcile that with the pure racing philosophy he seemed to cherish?
Well, that's the intense duality, isn't it? Senna rationalized it as payback for the perceived injustice of 1989 and the pole position ruling that morning. This is the context for his famous, uncompromising quote. "If you no longer go for a gap that exists, you are no longer a racing driver."
And he later admitted it was intentional.
A year later, he did. It just shows the incredible extremes of the mindset required to compete at that level. It was a battle fought on the track, in the courts, and in the mind.
Moving past the Prost saga, 1991 saw him secure his 3rd title, becoming the youngest 3-time world champion at the time.
That year, however, was really a demonstration of his mental strength over the machinery. Senna publicly voiced concerns about the competitiveness of the new Honda V12 engine, feeling it was less potent than the previous year's V10.
So he had to rely on fierce consistency early on.
Exactly. To build a crucial points gap before Nigel Mansell's superior Williams car became fully reliable.
And the battles with Mansell were legendary, often fought at terrifying speeds.
Oh, at the Spanish Grand Prix, we saw one of the most intense wheel-to-wheel duels in F1 history. Senna and Mansell diced down the main straight at over 320 kilometers per hour, mere centimeters apart.
Which shows an extraordinary mutual trust, despite their history.
It does. Mansell eventually took the win. But later that season, at the British GP, Senna retired on the final lap, and Mansell, after taking the victory, showed incredible sportsmanship by giving Senna a ride back to the pits on his side pod. A truly iconic moment.
Now, 1992 marked a major technical shift, making it perhaps the most challenging season for Senna since his debut year.
Senna remained at McLaren, and it was primarily out of loyalty to Honda. Their CEO personally requested he stay, even though Williams was the clearly dominant team.
Why was Williams so dominant?
That year, Williams, led by designer Adrian Newey, fielded the FW14B. It was a car that revolutionized the sport through the implementation of active suspension and traction control, these complex electronic driver aids. McLaren just struggled to match that technological leap.
So Senna was suddenly fighting a technical deficit, not just a talent deficit.
Precisely. Williams had automated a lot of the difficulty of controlling these high-powered F1 cars, maximizing mechanical grip at all times. So Senna, the human sensor who relied on tactile feedback, was fighting an uphill battle against a machine that didn't need his unique input to be fast.
Yet, Despite the struggles, that season also offered a profound moment of off-track heroism.
At the Belgian Grand Prix, during practice, Eric Comas had a horrific, heavy crash. Senna, driving past the scene, immediately stopped his own car, disregarding his position, his safety, and ran across the track to Comas's car.
The engine was still running.
Stuck at full RPM with a suspected fuel leak, risking an explosion. Senna turned off the engine, preventing a potential tragedy. It was a selfless act that underlined his deep concern for his peers, and it contrasted so sharply with his aggressive on-track persona.
1992 also introduced a burgeoning, aggressive rivalry with the young Michael Schumacher.
Schumacher was the rising tide, challenging the established order. The tension was instant. Schumacher accused Senna of blocking him aggressively in Brazil. Later, at the French Grand Prix, they collided and Senna retired.
And the relationship just deteriorated from there.
It did. At a German Grand Prix test session, Senna physically grabbed Schumacher by the collar in the pits, accusing him of dangerous blocking maneuvers on the track.
These repeated physical confrontations with Mansell, Schumacher, and later Irvine, they suggest a pattern. Was this volatile temper an inseparable part of his competitive genius?
It's highly probable. The same intensity and lack of compromise that allowed him to push the physical and mechanical limits on track also spilled over when he felt injustice, disrespect, or physical risk from his rivals. He saw racing as a matter of self-discovery and absolute control. Challenges to that control, whether technical or human, were met with an immediate, volatile response.
That volatility carried into 1993, his final full season at McLaren, a year defined by political battles over his contract.
Senna was desperate to get into a Williams car. He started 1993 as a free agent and even offered to drive for Williams for free.
But Prost blocked him.
Prost, who had returned to the team after a sabbatical, had inserted a clause into his own contract specifically vetoing Senna as a teammate. This political move forced Senna to stay at McLaren, where he drove race by race, reportedly earning a staggering $1 million per Grand Prix.
And despite driving a car with a significant technical disadvantage, a customer Ford engine, maybe 50 to 80 horsepower down on the Renault-powered Williams, he produced what many consider his greatest ever drive.
That would be the 1993 European Grand Prix at Donington Park. It is mandatory viewing for anyone interested in F1 history. The conditions were fast-changing, wet then dry, requiring superhuman instinct. Senna, relying purely on instinct, pulled off the famous lap of the gods.
Let's just detail that first lap alone.
He started fourth. Immediately, he was overtaken by Schumacher and Wendlinger, dropping to fifth. Then he demonstrated this unparalleled traction control, managed entirely by his right foot while others were just spinning their wheels. By the end of that single opening lap, he had passed Wendlinger, Schumacher, Damon Hill, and most importantly, Prost, to take the lead.
He overtook 4 cars in less than 4 miles on a soaking wet track.
And the rest of the race was pure mastery over superior machinery. He drove with such calculated aggression that he eventually lapped everyone except for second place. Prost, fighting the weather, set a record for the most pit stops in a Grand Prix that day, which just highlights the pressure Senna could put on even the most strategic driver.
His final F1 victory came in Australia, and it provided a surprising, emotional moment of reconciliation with Prost.
He took his 41st career victory, but the truly memorable moment was on the podium. Senna spontaneously pulled the retiring Prost onto the top step with him, sharing his victory in a public, conciliatory gesture that signaled the official end of their years-long, intense feud.
The season didn't end without one final flare-up of his notorious temper, though.
No, that occurred at the Japanese Grand Prix. Senna got into a heated post-race argument with backmarker Eddie Irvine, who he felt had recklessly and dangerously blocked him during the race. The argument escalated, and it culminated in Senna attempting to punch Irvine. He received a 6-month suspended race ban for the incident.
The 1994 season was meant to be his coronation. Finally, the move to Williams, replacing Prost, for a reported $20 million salary. He was in the dominant car, but the context of the sport had fundamentally changed.
The change was devastating for Williams. The FIA banned all electronic driver aids for 1994 active suspension, traction control, anti-lock brakes. The Williams FW16, designed by Adrian Newey, was fundamentally engineered around those aids. Suddenly, stripping them out made the car inherently unstable, particularly in the rear end.
And for Senna, the human sensor, This unstable, unpredictable car was a disaster.
It was. He was highly critical of the FW16 from the very first test. He said he had a very negative feeling about it. He publicly voiced this terrible sense of foreboding, predicting, and this is a quote, "It's going to be a season with lots of accidents, and I'll risk saying that we'll be lucky if something really serious doesn't happen."
A dark prediction that haunted the opening races.
It did. Despite securing pole position at all three opening events, the results were disastrous. He retired from the first two races. He was so suspicious of the dominant performance of Michael Schumacher's Benetton, suspecting they were secretly running banned electronics, that after he retired in the Pacific GP, he actually stood by the first corner of the track to watch the other cars pass, hoping to hear evidence of cheating.
He was desperate, frustrated, and already 20 points down on Schumacher before the third race at Imola.
And then came the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola, a weekend that quickly descended into a profound crisis.
The atmosphere was toxic before Sunday even started.
It was. First, Rubens Barrichello had a terrifying major crash during practice. Then, the next day during qualifying, we had the fatal crash of Roland Ratzenberger. Senna was visibly shaken by these events. He was seen carrying an Austrian flag, presumably intending to raise it if he won, in honor of Ratzenberger.
He didn't just worry privately, he actively sought change that weekend.
That's right. On the morning of the race, he spoke extensively with his old rival, Prost, who was there that weekend. They discussed immediately reforming the Grand Prix Drivers Association, the GPDA, to give drivers an organized voice to lobby for urgent safety improvements.
And he confided in Prost?
He did. He said, "I'm not optimistic at all about this race." It was a rare moment of vulnerability from a champion who was always, always in control.
A few hours later, on lap 7, the fatal accident occurred at the high-speed Tamarella corner. It was a loss that just silenced the entire sporting world.
An immense tragedy. His car left the track at high speed and hit the wall. He was airlifted to hospital and later pronounced dead. We have to acknowledge the loss of both Senna and Ratzenberger that weekend. These events expose the desperate need for change in the sports safety culture.
The subsequent investigation immediately focused on the Williams FW16, specifically on the steering column.
Senna, due to the uncomfortable seating position in that unstable car, had requested the steering wheel be moved. Since there wasn't time to manufacture a new, longer column, the team decided to modify the existing one. They cut and welded different parts together the night before the race to get the desired placement.
And the core question of the investigation was whether that hastily executed modification failed before the crash, causing him to lose steering, or if the column broke upon impact.
That was the crux of years of legal proceedings. 6 defendants were eventually charged with manslaughter in Italian courts, including senior Williams figures like Patrick Head and Adrian Newey.
And what was the final outcome?
Well, while initial trials saw widespread acquittals, an appeals court in 2005 ultimately determined that the steering column modification was poorly executed and that its breakage on track was the cause of the accident.
But those responsible were not ultimately penalized.
That's right. Although the court found the cause, Patrick Head, who was deemed culpable, was protected from prosecution by the statute of limitations just due to the length of the legal process. Newey was ultimately acquitted as he wasn't directly responsible for those specific modifications. The legal findings confirmed a failure in engineering, even if criminal responsibility couldn't be fully applied.
The reaction back in Brazil was instantaneous and overwhelming. It just demonstrated his status as a national icon.
The government declared 3 days of national mourning. The outpouring of grief was immense. The funeral procession in São Paulo was attended by an estimated 1 million people, making it one of the largest in the city's history.
Even internationally.
The Tokyo headquarters of Honda, where he was revered despite no longer driving for them, was just overwhelmed with floral tributes.
And the sport itself, though reeling, paid tribute immediately.
At the very next race in Monaco, the first 2 grid spots were left completely empty and painted with the colors of the Brazilian and Austrian flags in solemn honor of both lost drivers. And that summer, the Brazil national football team dedicated their 1994 World Cup victory to him, holding up that famous banner that read, "Senna, we speed together, the 4th title is ours."
The tragedy of Imola catalyzed an immediate, profound, and lasting transformation in motorsport safety. This is arguably his most significant legacy.
Without question. The dual tragedies of Ratzenberger and Senna served as the definitive turning point for Formula One. The sport was forced to confront its inherent dangers and enact radical, immediate reforms. These changes were sweeping. significant cuts to engine power, the introduction of stricter helmet standards, and most visibly, radical circuit redesigns.
The physical environment of the circuits changed drastically.
Yes, the notorious Tamburello corner at Imola, where Senna crashed, was fundamentally altered, transforming that high-speed bend into a much safer chicane. Improvements were mandated for crash barriers, runoff areas, and significant advancements were made in on-track medical procedures.
The cumulative result was a complete transformation of F1.
From a sport where fatalities were a periodic risk to one where they have become exceedingly rare, Senna, in his death, enforced the safety reforms he had been advocating for that very weekend.
Beyond safety, when we assess him purely as a driver, he remains consistently rated as the greatest of all time.
He's constantly at the top of every major poll. A 2009 poll by Autosport, where they surveyed hundreds of current and former F1 drivers, named him the greatest ever. More recently, AWS machine learning algorithms analyzing qualifying data also determined Senna to be the fastest qualifier of all time. His ability to extract the ultimate lap was, well, statistically unmatched.
And his reputation as the Rainmaster remains sacrosanct.
It absolutely endures. He holds the highest ratio of wins in wet races started, a testament to his uncanny ability to feel the limits of grip when others were just floundering. Drives like Monaco 84, Portugal 85, and especially Donington 93, they remain the benchmark for pure, instinctive driving skill, overcoming mechanical and conditional disadvantages.
Shifting to his personal side, his philanthropy was famously secretive, which contrasts so sharply with his very public life as a champion.
It was almost entirely hidden from the public. Senna secretly donated millions of US dollars throughout his career to aid poor children in Brazil. And crucially, he established the framework for a major charitable organization shortly before his death.
Which became the Instituto Ayrton Senna.
The IAS, yes. And it has since invested nearly 80 million US dollars in social and educational programs for low-income Brazilian youth.
Frank Williams, his final team boss, offered a particularly moving summation of this duality after Senna's death.
Williams famously stated that Senna was actually a greater man out of the car than in it. And that summarizes the spiritual side of the man, the devout Catholic who often read the Bible on long flights, dedicating his life and resources to helping others, completely separate from the hyper-aggressive figure you saw on the track.
He often spoke of racing itself as a quest for self-discovery.
That links the two sides together. His famous quote, "The harder I push, the more I find within myself," illustrates how he viewed the act of racing not just as a competition, but as a spiritual and personal exploration, constantly pushing the limits of human potential and understanding.
His personal interests also extended beyond the cockpit into aviation and engineering detail.
He enjoyed flying his own private jet and helicopter and piloting model aircraft. His influence even extended to Honda's road car division. When Honda was developing the NSX, Senna provided direct feedback to the chief engineer, insisting on increased chassis stiffness.
A testament to his acute feel for handling and his uncompromising pursuit of perfection, whether an F1 car or a road car. Finally, his cultural footprint is immense, and it continues through memorials, media, and his influence on the current generation of drivers.
The tributes are constant. Tracks have renamed corners, there are statues, and the Williams team included a small S logo on all their cars for decades in his honor. Perhaps the most visible influence is on Lewis Hamilton, who is an open idolizer.
Hamilton has made numerous tributes public.
When Hamilton matched Senna's 65 pole positions, the Senna family presented him with a race-worn Senna helmet, and his emotional act of waving the Brazilian flag after winning the São Paulo Grand Prix in 2021, mirroring Senna's signature celebration, was so profound that it led to Hamilton being granted honorary Brazilian citizenship.
And the commercial brand, symbolized by that double S logo meant to represent an S chicane, continues on strong.
The Instituto Ayrton Senna licenses his brand for products ranging from the McLaren Senna hypercar to Ducati superbikes. His life and legacy continue to be explored in major media, like the BAFTA-winning documentary Senna and a recent Netflix miniseries. His legacy remains one of the most powerful in sport.
We have completed this comprehensive material review of Ayrton Senna da Silva, analyzing the uncompromising racer, the precise technical marvel, and the charitable, spiritual individual whose life demanded perfection and whose death demanded systemic change.
The final profound element for you to consider is the rare, fragile vulnerability Senna displayed in 1994. For a man who defined himself by confidence and control, his public acknowledgement of the inherent risks, His prediction of accidents, his action to revive the GPDA, and his deeply pessimistic comments to Prustall highlight a champion who had shifted his focus from his own personal conquest to the collective well-being of the sport. His last acts were those of a safety advocate, a necessary final contradiction in a career built on glorious risk.
A truly profound conclusion to a legendary life. Thanks for listening.